I'm Rick Stivers. I'd like to welcome you to Young Martin's Reels. Today, this reel is going to be a special request that was part of my presentation on New Year's Eve as my goodbye to 2024. And this is a Wright and McGill Stream and Lake reel, model number 88A. And we're going to take this thing apart, service it, and I'll be right up front with you. I've already had this reel apart, which is a good thing it did, or this video would be like 2 hours long, because it took me about 2.5 hours to figure out how to take this thing apart. Once I knew how to do it, it wasn't a problem. So we're going to go through and strip it all down, and I hope you enjoy the video. All right, so let's get started on this. Oh, let's do a functional check first. First off, it's missing this knob, and I think I'm going to make one in my wood shop. I will show you guys how I go about doing that. But there's the reel. It's operating that way. The anti-reverse is a little bit flaky. It works sometimes it doesn't. The claws in this thing are pretty heavily worn, and I really think that's why it's having trouble with the anti-reverse. But there's the anti-reverse override. That seems to work okay. But it's when you go into anti-reverse mode that it just, if you hold it there, then the anti-reverse will work. Otherwise, it tends to not do so well. Okay, this is the drag knob, and the drag works on it. You got your push button, you push the button, it locks in, good, all that works. So let's get started. Let's take this thing apart, and it's definitely a different spin cast reel. So we'll start off. This just turns counterclockwise about 10 degrees and then comes off like that. Okay, and we're going to clean this all up good here before we put it back together. Okay, now this took me a little bit to figure out, even though it's actually much like, say, a Zebco is. I assumed there was some kind of special locking mechanism or something that holds all this together. It's not. It's just screwed onto the shaft. Hold the handle, grab hold of the rotor, turn it counterclockwise, and it should unscrew just like that. Okay, we're going to clean all this up, get it functional. All I did was take it apart. A lot of the felt here is missing, and I'm not going to try to replace that. I'm going to leave it as is. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off this clip right here. There we go. That's got that off. And now the spool should come off. There we go. And if you look inside here, first off, this is our clicker right here for our drag. And this ring right here fits right into this little notch right here. That tightens down on that ring right there, and that's the drag on this reel. Okay, so now we're going to come over to this side, and we're going to take out these 3 screws. Well, I'll tell you what, before we do that, let's go ahead and remove the handle. We don't need it on here anymore. I believe this is a 10 millimeter. Okay. That removes the handle. Now we'll come back and remove these 3 screws. Move the side cover. Now there's nothing special inside the side cover. It's just a cover plate. Okay. Now we're going to go and we're going to push this other side out. There we go. And that removes the gear side of the plate. Okay, there's our drag. Tell you what, let's do. Before we do this, let's go ahead and explain how this works as best we can. Okay. As you can see, your normal gear is going to operate. It's going to rotate, and it's going to turn our pinion gear. Okay. If you look, this button here pushes in on the center button axle shaft, much like any other spin cast reel, except in this case, the button is physically attached to the axle shaft. It's anchored in there. And then there is this spring here. That's the return spring for the button. But there's also, if you notice down inside here, well, you can't see it, we'll show you when I take it apart. There is a spring inside here. Now this originally had a regular cotter pin. Here it is right here. Okay. And I only want to use that one more time, so I left it out and I put a piece of steel spring wire in there for right now to hold it, because I knew I was coming right back to take it apart. Now the drag works this way. As you tighten it, it's going to move this lever down, and as it moves that lever down, that pushes more and more tension here against that metal ring on the spool holding it. Okay, so that pretty much is what you see. All right, let's go ahead and loosen up the drag. There, that's what's holding it. There we go. Okay, now we're down to this part here, and this spring, you can see there, it's held in place there. This is just the drag spring. And I don't know if this will come out or not. I didn't try to take it out the first time I took it apart. Yes. Okay, that takes the pin out for that. Now we can just reach over here and we're going to grab hold of this return spring and unhook it right there. And now we can just lift this part out. Okay, there's the drag spring. Okay, now we've done that. That brings us down to here, and this is where I've added that spring in there, and it is nothing more than a piece of wire that I've put in there. Okay, now we should be able to get hold of it now that we straightened it. There we go, there it is. It's just a piece of spring wire that I put in there. Okay, with that out, we should be able to pop the button out. There we go, there's the axle shaft. Now this axle shaft, I actually had to take a file and file this end of it in order to get it out, because see how it flares? Well, it had been flared out so much that it wouldn't come out. So I cleaned it up a while ago. It still could use a little more cleaning in there. But I got it to where it would easily come in and out. All right, but now look inside here. This is the interesting part of this that I've never seen before in any other reel. Is inside the axle shaft is a spring. Okay, and that spring sits down inside there, and that button actually presses against that spring, and it actually acts as a cushion when you're pushing the button up, in case you push it too hard. Okay, I'm going to slide that out and set it over here with the cotter pin so it doesn't get lost, and probably try to clean the grease off of it a little better. Okay, we're down to this point now. The button will come out if you grab a hold of this pin and pull it out. And it needs to go up a little bit more. I don't want to take it all the way. There we go. Now, there's the button out. And that leaves us just this. And I don't know if I have a pair of pliers that will take this ring off. I don't know if I have one small enough. I'm going to try this one. I just filed this one down, hoping that I could use it on there. Chris promised me that I would probably take this apart, but I told him I would not if I couldn't get a set of pliers into the snap ring. All right, I've got it down to a 1.4 millimeter. And even that is still too small. And so here's what I've decided. Rather than absolutely ruining my snap ring pliers to get out one snap ring, we're going to leave that in. Chris, told you I might not take it out. I'm not going to. In the event that you absolutely had to take this off, you can file down a set of snap ring pliers and get them down to the point where you can get that out. I could probably pry it out with a pair of screwdrivers, but I don't want to. It's going to be a bear to put it back in. Okay, I'm going to scrub all these parts back up. Oh, wait a minute. We're not done taking apart. Let's get over to this side. We're going to rotate this around. That's our drag lever. And we're going to lift this gear back out. Okay, and now this is the guy that's not working all that well. And if you look, it's got a lever here. This lever pushes one way, up like that, goes forward. And, oh, I see what it is. Okay, yeah, this is, the lever is worn out. It is supposed to be right there on, yeah, it's when it comes down like this, it's supposed to lock that in right there. But this is so worn that it will no longer hold that pin. So the anti-reverse doesn't work. The anti-reverse override has failed. Okay. It's supposed to catch right there. And it's so worn out that it can't grab hold of that anymore. If you look, see how much that's moving on the shaft? Yeah, there should not be any movement on that shaft. And while it's probably possible to drill that, to take this off, to remove this screw right here, a nut, remove that, pull all this apart, and epoxy up that hole, JB weld it up and drill it again so that this can't move around freely like that. It's possible to do that, but I'm not going to do that, folks. Okay, it's going to be a shelf sitter. Hopefully yours is not that worn out. Okay, but we're going to go through, clean all this up, and I'll be back with you in a minute with clean parts, and we'll start the assembly process. I think it looks like we're ready to start putting this back together. And we're going to start off over here with this side plate. We're going to see if we can put it back together. And we've got this gear that's going to go in. Now let's go ahead and put some oil on the gear and slide it into this side plate here. Now you may have to maneuver this drag cam over here in order to get it to go in. Okay, and once it's in, there we go. Maneuver it around a little bit till it starts to move. All right, that's an anti-reverse override. There's anti-reverse. And again, see how worn these parts are? They're gonna work sometimes, sometimes they're not gonna work. I'm gonna add a little oil to them just to try to help them along, but they're pretty well shot. And sometimes it wants to kill it, sometimes it doesn't. And it's not spring loaded or anything. Now this would go up like this. That would now there we go. That's with that held up right there, it should actually operate pretty well. But in the event this pulls down, and the only thing that's going to do that is drag on the spool, catching it. That's the only thing that would lift that back, and that would deactivate the anti-reverse. Okay, but activated, there it is. All right, so we got that in. Let's set that over to the side, and let's see about putting some of this stuff back together. First thing I want to put in is the spool. It'll be easier if we do that, I think, because then we can go ahead and install our drag right up against that without having to try to force it down in there. So let's put that on, and let's put our clip on it. There we go. There's the clip on the spool. Okay, and if you look, see the hole here? See those holes? I don't know how well you can see that. Let me turn on this other light. Okay, if you look down inside that hole, that's where that lever for the anti-reverse goes. Okay, and it goes up into the spool. Okay, when that catches, that's going to lock the spool and trip it back. I believe what will happen then is if you're in drag mode and you pull that up like that, is it's going to deactivate the anti-reverse and allow this to slide easier. I think. I'm not positive of that, but I think that's what it does. Okay, let's go ahead and install our drag lever. That's going to be this guy, and he's going to go in under over here like that, and then drop down right there over that hole, and then we put in this pin like that. And that's going to hold that drag lever. Now, as you pull down on that drag lever, it puts tension on that spool. Okay. Next thing we're going to want to put in is going to be this axle shaft and its spring. Remember, it's got this internal spring. And let's go ahead and put a little grease on the spring. Slide that inside like that. Now, I want to go ahead, if I can, and adjust this cotter pin ever so slightly so that it will be able to make it through the axle shaft. I think it will. Let's kind of pre-fit it prior to putting it in. There's one hole up that. Now you've got to get the spring to go down prior to putting that pin in. Okay. And what will hold that spring in is going to be that lever. I think we'll be able to get this to go in. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. Okay, we're going to go ahead and grease it. I normally oil drive shafts, but this one here's a little stiff, so we're going to go ahead and grease it. Slide it in. That feels pretty good there, actually. Slide it over. Okay, now we're going to come back with this button. Now this lever was bent into a curlicue. You can see a little bit of the bend still left in it. But it was bent in a curlicue. As this hook here was curled, almost hooked back up. And I don't believe it was supposed to be that way. I think somebody did that trying to tighten this spring lever right here so that it would return the axle. And instead of taking it apart and cleaning it so that it would return, instead they bent it. So I've straightened it out, and we're going to slide this back in now, like so. And that will be going in over there to that axle shaft with that spring in it. See how it fits there? Like that. Okay, and we're going to turn this around, and we're going to try to get this pin to go back in its hole. And I'm going to use this rubber mallet. Got to line up the hole and keep it in a line. There we go. To get that pin to go in. And the pin's got to go down at least flush with the housing, like that. Okay. Now we still have the spring inside here. See the spring? Can you see it? Okay, we're going to slide that in. Put it on each side of that lever. Like that. Now if you look, if you push in on the axle and push down on the button, now you see that it's spring loaded. So what we're going to try to do, let's see, we'll get this where you can see it, because I don't think you can see that. I'm holding the button in, or the axle shaft in, and pushing in at the button at the same time. And see how that's spring loaded? That spring's going to push it back out. All right, that's what we're going to do. Now I'm going to put it down here so that that can go there. And then I've got to try to work in this cotter pin into getting it into its place. And I'm going to try to do that while you guys can see. And I don't know that that's going to be possible, but that's what I'm going to try to do. Okay, so I've got a grip on the cotter pin. We're pushing that down. We're going to push down on the button. Can you see? And we're going to try to feed. It keeps wanting to spread open. And it's not a brand new cotter pin, that's the problem. There we go. One side, the other side. Okay, we've got the cotter pin inserted. Now I'm going to spread the legs of the cotter pin to hold it in place. Now I got it separating. Okay. Okay, that's got the cotter pin in and spread. Now we need to get this spring hooked up. And I'm going to hook onto the spring, bring it around, put it on the button. That's our button return. Okay. And that button is going on. Now see, this is where the problem could be, is that this doesn't want to come all the way back. And this is where I think they bent that up trying to make that happen. But we're going to hope that it's going to be okay. Let's go ahead now and grease our main gear. And grease the pinion gear. And let's slide this side plate back in. Now we've got to adjust. See our drag knob? We've got to get that around to where it's going to be over here like that. Okay? Now when you adjust it, that's how your drag adjusts. All right, and as that pushes back, that's also going to pull this back more because that spring's going to be there. Okay, notice it's actually coming back a little further. Still could stand to come up a little more, I think, but we'll see what happens when we, nah, it's going to be fine. That's good, because if you put the rotor on, it's coming all the way down. Okay, so that's in place. It's up against the side plate almost. There we go. Okay, and we can go ahead at that point, if you want, and put the handle on, although I'm going to take it back off in a little while and see if we can make a knob for it. Okay, I'll snug that up. Okay, now with that pulled in tight, yeah, that turns fine. All right, let's go ahead. All right, next thing is going to go on is this side plate. There we go. And these 3 screws. There's our drag knob adjust. We can loosen and tighten that as needed. Okay, then there's this rotor. And let's go ahead and put some grease on the rotor and on the head of this where it screws down. Put this on and screw it down. Now, if we were putting a line on here, what we'd want to do is hold this. We would want to unscrew this rotor, and we would want to attach the line under here. Okay, I'm not putting a line on here. There's about 5 turns of line left on here. I'm not going to bother trying to take that off. But that's how you would do it. You would attach your line, and then you would attach this rotor. I've seen people on the internet saying, how in the world do I put line on this thing? Well, that's how you do it. Okay, tighten the rotor. Put on the cap, give it a 10-degree turn, and there you have, by the way, if you want to see how that's working, watch here, okay, and you push the button, this comes up, the button goes in, now you can cast. When you wind it, the button comes back out and starts to retrieve your line. Let me show it again. Button comes up, the pin comes in right there. As you wind it, it drops back down, the pin comes out and starts to retrieve the line. So there you have the Wright McGill Stream and Field model 88A, and hopefully in a few seconds here on this video you're going to see me with a new handle for this. I'm going to go out in the wood shop and see if I can make a knob that'll fit this. It's going to be in 2 pieces. I want to make a wooden knob that's in 2 pieces that you glue together, clamp it down and rubber band it and glue it, and then hopefully I'll have an operational knob, and we'll see if I get that, see if I can make that happen. That's going to also include having to repair my bandsaw by changing out the drive belt with this one. Okay, and that way I can cut the piece of wood in half. All right, so I'll be back in a minute if I'm successful. All right, I told you I was going to try to make a knob for this, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I took a piece of walnut, kind of like this, and I cut it in half, like so. And I took and I drilled a hole through it, right along the seam, that was 1/64 of an inch larger in diameter than this shaft was. Okay, then I got it set up here, and I drilled a countersunk hole here. I made this a little bit longer than what the shaft was, so that there would be room for this head to go in here like this. Okay, and then I'll set this up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to epoxy this into place, and it should, I'm hoping, hold up real nice. I got to be sure not to get any of the epoxy into the shaft. If I do, I'm just going to have to crack it back open and go back and start again. But if I can get it lined up good without getting any epoxy in the shaft, that's how it'll fit right there. Okay, and once it's epoxied together, I should be able to take it out there on my belt sander and very gently sand this down to where it's a nice comfortable knob. That's what I'm shooting for. I guess that tomorrow you'll see whether or not I was successful at trying to epoxy this. All right, I've epoxied it together and wrapped it with rubber bands to kind of act as a tension on it. And I'm hoping that I haven't gotten glue down inside. If I have, then I will have to break it off and start again. It doesn't feel like it has glue in it, but it might. We'll know in about 5 minutes. This is 5-minute epoxy. And if it's glued, it'll let me know, I'm sure. And it might be good just to keep it moving for 5 minutes. But I think it's going to be okay. Probably wouldn't hurt to put a few drops of oil, but I don't want the oil to mess up the finish when I polyurethane the knob. So right now the knob's too big, but I think when I get it cut down, I think it's going to be fine. Well, I wouldn't call it a perfect knob, but it looks like it'll work pretty good. I would be comfortable handling it, having my hand on it. So that's what I'm going to do. Shoot a little clear on it. Get it to spin around just a little bit so I can get some more clear on it. Okay, and there you have the knob. Let's see, a little more light on it. There we go. There's the knob, and it's not perfect by any means, but it's a whole lot better than grabbing hold of this blank steel shaft. So we're going to go ahead, put this onto the reel, and tighten down the nut. There you have the Wright McGill Streaming Lake model 88A, and it works pretty well. I'm pretty happy with the handle, and it's going to go on my shelf, and it'll hopefully do everything we want it to do. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit the like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button. Tell me what you didn't like about it. Maybe it's this knob that I made. Maybe you're a purist and want it to look just like it did originally. Well, I don't have that knob, nor do I have a source for one, so I didn't do that. But for now, that's Rick Stivers with Young Martin's Reels, signing out.